Okay, so hook baits to me are a crucial part of catching carp, and particularly at this time of year. We're at the end of the spring now, coming into the summer, and from this period onwards, right the way through to the winter, and sometimes even in the winter, I use a lot of bait. You know, once these fish have spawned, they're going to be hungry, looking for food, and I want to be able to give them plenty of food. But the one downside to putting a lot of bait in is that it can make it quite hard for you to get a bite. You know, if you're putting 5, 6, 7 kilos of bait out, particularly if you're introducing particles and stuff as well, you know, if fish come onto the spot, they can spend a long time feeding before they get to your hook bait, and in turn, you then get a bite. So by having a hook bait that matches everything on the spot, you could get a bite very quickly, but at the same time, it could be one of the last items of food to get picked up. So for me, I want to use a hook bait that the carp are drawn towards, and certain times of the year, you can do that with colour. You know, we all know how good bright hook baits can be for getting a quick bite, but I think that once the weather warms up and the fish are, you know, actively hungry and wanting to eat food regularly, the bright hook baits to me aren't quite as good. I will often tip my baits with a tiny bit of colour, and that is simply there to grab attention, but not to, you know, it doesn't make the hook bait look too obvious. So a tiny little bit of yellow on top is what I go for, but the hook bait itself is a drab colour, exactly the same as the feed I'm putting out. So when I'm boilie fishing, I'm using like a dark red fish meal, and my hook bait will be the same, and it has that tiny bit of yellow on top. But with that said, my hook baits are always boosted. I never use them out the tub anymore. Although they're good enough to use straight out the bag, or out the tub, sorry, you can do that. But for me, I want that bait, you know, I want it booming on the spot. When a fish comes in, starts feeding, you know, the bait is on the spot to draw the fish onto the spot. And obviously to get them feeding, but once they started feeding, I want them to pick that hook bait up as soon as possible. You know, the quicker you can get a pick up, the quicker you're going to get a bite, and over the course of a session, and particularly a season, you're going to get a lot more bites by doing that. So having a hook bait that stands out, to me, very, very important. And at this time of year, when I'm boilie fishing, these are my hook baits of choice. They're a wafter. I don't really use straight bottom baits anymore. In fact, for many years now, I just haven't really used out the bag bottom baits. I always used to plug them with cork. Obviously these wafters got cork dust in them, it saves all the aggro. They're nice and hard, they don't fall apart. You know, there's lots of reasons to use a sort of out the pot wafter like these ones. So before I use them, there's a process that I put in place. It takes about a week or so, maybe a little bit longer at times, and the longer they can cure, the better. But these hook baits here, these are 18mm Atlantic heats, but with a difference. You know, they've been massively boosted up. So if I undo this lid here, there you go, look, you can see them gooey, horrible, smelly, the sort of thing that your missus will chuck you out the house for having indoors. And my garage, when I'm preparing these, doesn't smell very nice. So if you are going to do this, make sure you do it in the garden or the garage, or away from too many human beings, because you're going to upset people. But the first thing to do, and I'll just run you through the process of how I actually, you know, turn these hook baits into what they are here. So I'm going to take like I say, a bog standard pot of wafters, and the first thing I add is Scent from Hell liquid. It's a liquid I've used for many years, well before it had a name. You know, Mark has, I don't know how long ago it was, probably getting on for a decade ago, something like that. And I've used that liquid right from the start. And I remember the first time I smelled it, and now when you talk to people, it's become widely known as probably the worst smelling liquid attractor available, but the fish absolutely love it, and I use it all the time. First step, take the wafters out and I'll spray them up. So I'll give them a nice good coating of Scent from Hell, and I'm going to repeat that process probably 4 or 5 times. So maybe once a day, go out to the garage, spray them all up, let them soak it in, and I can repeat that process 4 or 5 times. You know, really load them up. I'm not holding back. It does smell a lot, but I'm putting a lot of liquid on them. And once that's done, on say the 5th time I do it, the hook baits, while they're still wet, that is important. So spray them up, hook baits are wet, and then I add crustacean powder to them. It's a very fine powder. As you open the pot, quite often it will waft up into the air, you know, very small bits. And because of the liquid, when you roll the hook baits in that, you know, it breaks down and goes into the bait, and that is very important. That is what the curing process is all about. It's having stuff there that with time makes the hook baits better and better. You know, you can't just do this in a day and then use them. It's just not going to be the same. So first thing that goes on is the Scent from Hell, followed by the crustacean powder. And then after that, a little bit more liquid again, a little bit more Scent from Hell, and then in with the sea stim. And the sea stim's lovely. I like to eat that. Get a lot of funny looks by my mates as I'm doing it. I cannot help myself but lick my finger, dip it in the pot and have a little taste. And if you do the same, it's quite a beefy sort of taste. You know, it's human grade, I'm sure, and I like it, and so do the carp. So that's the second thing that goes on. And once you've done that, you want the hook bait to be quite dry. You know, it's a bit more coarse than the crustacean powder. And once that second layer of powder is on there, the hook baits, like I say, they'll appear quite dry, and all the hook baits should have a relatively even coating around them, and you're almost done at that stage. I leave them for a couple of days just to let that do its magic, and then on goes a little bit of hot fish oil. In the winter, I use the super spice oil, but in the summer, spring, and into the autumn, I use the hot fish oil. And as you can see here, you know, really gooey, really smelly. And the carp very much like them, and it's no wonder, you know, you're putting a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of really nice ingredients onto your hook bait. So when I cast this onto a spot, I'm very, very confident that this bait stands out above the rest. You know, it doesn't matter how much bait is on that spot, this is kicking up. It smells, tastes, everything about my hook bait is just elevated in comparison to everything else on the spot. And in turn, I get quicker bites. And a lot of the time, you can use things like the birds. The birds are a very good indicator. Unless you can go out in the bait and look at a spot, you know, the birds are the best indicator you can have of what is actually happening out there. So let's say I put 50 baits onto a spot. I get a bite in the night. In the morning, the coots might turn up. If I put 50 baits out there, and my rod is back in position, I haven't rebaited, and a coot comes out and dives and picks me up straight away, then there's very, very high chance that there's only a handful of baits left on the spot. But if the coot is continuously diving, there's obviously a lot of bait there. So that's a good indicator that you've had a bite, but your hook bait has been one of the first ones to go, and that is exactly what you want. So in the summer, this is what I'm going to be using, and like I say, it takes about a week, but it is a process that is well worth doing. The more effort you put into your fishing, the more you're going to get back out of it.